Hi there and welcome back. And the first question type or area we're going to look at that you're going to find in the NBTs is actually called text genre. Now, very simply, a genre means a category. And this is questions that are taking a look at how the writing, the style of the writing, the tone of the writing, the attitude, opinion, or intention. And they're asking you these questions about how the writing is structured, how it's coming across, because they want to test whether you actually understand the piece of writing. So, just to recap, in the academic literacy section, you will either get a comprehension passage or a short extract, and you will be asked multiple choice questions based on that extract. So, the first thing we're going to do is go through these words: style, tone, attitude, opinion, and intention, to kind of get an idea of what they mean, to solidify your understanding of that before we move on to examples, to kind of look at how these questions are asked, what to look for, and strategies to tackle them. So we can start with style. Style, very simply, is just how something is written, and it varies depending on what you're writing. If you're writing a letter to the president of the country, it's going to be in a more formal style. If you are writing a letter to your friend at school, it's going to likely be pretty casual, pretty informal. So it's essentially how something is written. And the important thing to remember here is style impacts the meaning of something. Then we have tone. Tone is how the writer's attitude is actually conveyed. And the way this is done is the choice of words. If he has a very negative attitude to something, you're going to find his word choice is going to be using pretty hard, pretty negative words. So it's conveyed through word choice. The tone could be kind of conveyed through sentence construction. And we're going to take a look at some examples of this a little later. And then we have attitude. And this is attitude, the attitude of the writer. These kind of questions come up quite often in the NBT academic literacy section. It's very simply the writer's personal feeling about something. Personal feelings about a topic is what I would say. And then we have opinion. And very similar to attitude, it's what the writer believes about a specific topic. And finally, intention. And with intention questions, what they're really looking for is, do you understand the purpose of the text, the comprehension passage, the extract? What's the point? Very simply, what's the point? So when they ask about style, tone, attitude, opinion, and intention, to sum up, this usually falls under text genre questions. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at 4 questions within this section and kind of discuss strategies on how to approach them. Okay, so we have our first question. And it reads, the global shift towards renewable energy sources marks a significant stride in combating climate change. While this transition promises to reduce carbon emissions and lessen reliance on fossil fuels, it also poses substantial economic challenges and workforce disruptions in traditional energy sectors. So, of course, this is a short extract, so this is not a comprehension passage. It's just a short bit of text and you need to answer a question. This passage indicates the author's perspective towards the subject is A, optimistic, B, critical, C, nuanced, and D, indifferent. And from the get-go, they're talking about the author's perspective. And this would be an attitude or opinion question. You're looking for the personal feelings, beliefs of the author, and this is something that you're going to get from reading the passage. So, if you actually look at the passage, initially it is talking about renewable energy. It is talking about how it makes a significant stride in combating climate change. And so, first off, I would say, okay, is this sentence actually positive or negative? Something that is significant, that is a positive sounding word. It means that a large stride combating climate change, which we all know is pretty dangerous. So it's actually doing something to stop climate change. So I would say, okay, this bit of the sentence is actually positive. So the author is suggesting something positive about renewable energy sources, right? So when they talk about the passage, they're talking about renewable energy sources, which is the main part of this passage. Then we look at the second sentence. While this transition promises to reduce carbon emissions and lessen reliance on fossil fuels, it also poses substantial economic challenges and workforce disruptions in traditional energy sectors. So the first bit of the sentence talks about reducing carbon emissions, combating climate change. And so generally one would think this is kind of a positive. So he's saying, while renewable energy sources are positive, they also pose substantial economic challenges, so that's something that could be negative, and workforce disruptions in traditional energy sectors. So if the workforce is disrupted, then of course that is a negative thing. So he talks about a couple of positives, but then he goes into talking about some of the drawbacks, some of the negative things. So I'm going to put a little minus sign there. So from this little short extract, what we can take away is he's talked about positives, he's talked about negatives. And then I'd go to my potential answers. The passage indicates the author's perspective towards the subject is A, optimistic. So if you don't know, optimistic means pretty positive, pretty happy about something. They're feeling like that thing has great promise. So now that we've looked at the passage, would you say that the author's perspective towards the subject is optimistic? Well, yes. In the first two sentences, he does say positive things. But we haven't taken into consideration the fact that he's also talked about some of the drawbacks. Okay, so right from the get-go, just by having a look at that sentence, having a look at the positive and negative connotations, we'd kind of scratch A out. B, is the author's perspective towards the subject critical? So critical means that he is, of course, it comes from criticize. If you think of that verb, is he feeling negative towards the subject? Well, no, he said something positive, he said something negative. So it's not completely critical. C, nuanced. Firstly, you may not know what nuanced means. If you know what nuanced means, it means that he is providing a perspective that has both positives and negatives that he's thought about. So it's not something that is just positive, something that is just optimistic or critical. He's thinking about both kind of things. So if you know what nuanced means at the outset of this, you will be like, hey, this could be a potential answer. If you don't know what nuanced means, or if you don't know what one of these words means, what I would do is just move on to the next and see whether it's possible to eliminate or confirm other answers. So I'd move on to indifferent. Indifferent means he doesn't really care. He doesn't really care. His perspective towards it is kind of neutral. And as we've looked at the passage initially and we kind of got, he's talking about the positives. He's talking about how it's a significant stride. And then he talks about the negatives. He's not so much indifferent. He's pretty much putting an opinion forward. And so you would see that D definitely doesn't fit. And then you would go back to circling your answer C. So the important thing, and I think when we talk about strategies, we will talk about this process of elimination. Even if you don't know what a word means, the first step is to just move on to the next word and see whether you understand that and whether you can eliminate that from the possible questions. And then the second step is actually to look at the context, but we will talk more about that later. But this sort of strategy of kind of looking at specifically when they're talking about an opinion question or an attitude question, the author's attitude towards something, I would look at the sentences and kind of get, does the sentence feel positive? Does the sentence feel negative? And from there, I would be able to deduce which answer fits the best. Okay, we're going to whiz through this question very quickly. Basically, it's about today's online world, the advertising spaces, and what the author actually thinks about this. And the question is about the tone of the passage. And very simply, the tone, just to recap, is how the author's attitude is conveyed through the words of the passage. And from the outset, I'm going to look and I'm going to employ the same strategy of looking at positive and negative sentences to kind of figure out tone. Because I have a look at this, and a lot of the tone questions are kind of, what does he think about this? And is this positive? Is this negative? So a lot of it centers around positive and negative words. So I'm going to look at the first sentence. In the clamor of today's online world, where digital ads clamor for attention and pop-ups disrupt the user experience, one can't help but yearn for the simplicity of less crowded digital spaces. So what is he actually saying about the online world? He's saying that the online world is overwhelming and that one yearns for the simplicity of less crowded digital spaces. So what is he really saying about today's online world? It feels very negative. He's talking, and you can kind of get this from the words he's using. Clamor, disrupt. One can't help but yearn for the simplicity of less crowded digital spaces. So he's saying something pretty negative. The incessant demands to click, subscribe, and buy can overwhelm even the most patient of souls. This is, quite obviously negative. It's overwhelming even the most patient of souls. So I would say that overwhelmingly, I'm finding that the author's attitude and tone is pretty negative. He does not feel good about today's online world. So then we go to the answers. Indifferent. Indifferent, of course, means that he doesn't care. No, he does care. It's very strongly negative. I would get rid of indifferent. Frustrated. Does he sound frustrated? Maybe. Frustrated is a negative word. Maybe I would put this as a potential. Does he seem amused by today's online world? And amused is generally something that has a good connotation. He feels entertained. Does he feel entertained by today's online digital world? No, he does not. D, optimistic. And this, of course, is a very positive word. He feels good about it. Does he feel good about today's online world? No, from the extract above, he does not. And we would end up with frustrated, which is the only negative word over here. Okay. So in this question, we're seeing they talk about the style of this passage is intended to. So it is a style question, but it is mostly an intention question. What is this passage actually trying to tell the reader? So if we look at the passage, telemedicine has seen a rapid increase in adoption across healthcare systems worldwide, particularly highlighted during the COVID-19 pandemic. This technology allows patients to consult with doctors via video calls, reducing the need for in-person visits and potentially lowering the risk of spreading infectious diseases. Now, the style of this passage is intended to appeal to the reader's emotions. The passage seems kind of factual if we look at it. He tells us what telemedicine is, he tells us how the technology works, and what the outcome is. This is kind of where he's telling us what it is, how it's increased, what is it, and what the outcomes are, potentially lowering the risk of spreading infectious diseases. So I would not say that this is trying to appeal to readers' emotions. He'd be using more emotional, evocative language if this was the case. So I would sort of scratch this out. B, to inform readers. Whenever we have the word inform, it's simply to suggest that the author is giving information to readers. I would say that given this passage, this could be a possibility. And then C, entertain readers. Is he trying to make people laugh? Is he trying to amuse people with what he's talking about? He's talking about telemedicine, and it's a very informational type of passage, so I'm going to go with no. D, is he trying to persuade readers? Now, if you read the passage, you might think that, well, he seems to have quite a positive outlook on telemedicine. Is he trying to persuade us about telemedicine? But if you look at the style, if you look at the words he's using, while there are positive connotations to telemedicine, he is not really making a case for something. He's simply stating. And this is the difference between a persuasion argument and an argument that's informing someone. He's not persuading you. He's just basically simply putting the information across. And so I would say D does not fit. And so we are left with B. The passage, which largely deals with just telling us about telemedicine, is informing readers. So in a question like this, you wouldn't use the positive negative strategy. You would try to read the style, read the intention, and kind of decide what fits, what the writer's intention in writing the passage is. So that would be approached from a very different way to the attitude opinion questions that we kind of did earlier.